Hello? Oh, good. It's working. I just wanted to welcome you and tell you this is not just a lecture, this is a dialogue. If you hear me, I want us to, you may or may not agree with everything you hear and just be polite to each other, but it's very important. It's extremely important that you're just not listening, but being able to communicate. Okay? That's why I want to make us different than all the other lecture series. And I don't want to make it into a lecture series. We are going to be introduced by the head of our board, Bill Johnston, is going to introduce our speaker, since he knows him quite well.
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to introduce Scott. I think a lot of you know him, but it's hard to describe his career. He's been a tech entrepreneur, a teacher, a bartender, an investment banker. I think I could go on, and more recently, a novelist. Scott spoke here a couple of years ago at the Couder Institute, and apparently it was great, but I had COVID that week, so I just heard about this from Dale. And in the subsequent 2 years, two things have happened to Scott. One is he died, actually, several times. And also he wrote another novel, which I think he'll be talking to you about both things today. So, Scott?
Sorry, grabbing my nose here. So it goes without saying that no one ever, there's never unanimous support for anything I ever say. So, but disagreement's okay. Great to be back here at the Couder Institute after 2 years. Looking forward to chatting about both subjects that Bill mentioned. First, I want to introduce one guest here, Andrew Gutman, who's sitting. Wave your hand, Andrew. Andrew is running for Congress in your district, and I urge you all to get to know him. A great guy, very smart, deserves to be your congressman. So the last time I was here, I was talking about Campus Land, which is my first novel. Wait, I'll wave it around. There we go. Looks like that. It did very well. It got to number 15 on Amazon and is being turned into a TV series, which is very exciting. It's still, these things are never done till they're done, so I don't want to say 100% for sure, but it looks like 80 or 90%, which is kind of fun. So I get to participate in these calls where, like, who would you cast as this person or that person? It's good. Fun stuff for someone who has never done anything like that before. So interesting experience a little less than a year ago. Last April 30th, which happens to be our mother's birthday, I was playing pickleball. No jokes. It's a great sport. No smirking. I hear some smirking. With about 16 friends. And I was in between games. I was standing over on the side talking to one of my friends. And I felt just very lightheaded all of a sudden. And there was a chair next to me, and I thought, okay, I better sit down in that chair because it's like a curtain was coming down. I made it to the chair. The next thing I remember, a bunch of people are hovering over me, and they come into focus, and it's my friends, and I'm on the ground, and for some reason they're trying to hurt me. Like, why are you hurting me right now? And they came into focus pretty quickly, and then people started clapping. Like, what? Why? Okay, I get the fact I fainted. That doesn't deserve applause. But then the EMTs showed up, and it was explained to me that I'd had a cardiac arrest. And one of my friends said, "Hey, dude, you got the full CPR there. You got the defibrillator and everything." Turns out this happened about 15 feet away from a defibrillator. And I said, "Was there mouth-to-mouth involved?" He said, Yeah, and my friend is rather slovenly. I'd like, tell me it wasn't you. There was one woman in the group, a very attractive Belgian woman. It was her. Please, that's what they tell me. So I'm entertaining no alternatives. So what happened while I was out? It turns out I was out for about 8 or 9 minutes, and everyone around me was quite panicked. There was one person there who had CPR training, and he went right at it, and they went and got the defibrillator and put that to use, and it worked. I was revived, and I felt fine at that point. I got carted off to the hospital, and the nurse promptly told me that only 1 in 100 people who have cardiac arrests, and that's this point I'm learning the difference between a cardiac arrest and a heart attack. Cardiac arrest, way worse. You're flatlining. Heart attack, we have a cardiologist right here who can explain all the nuances. A heart attack, your heart goes a little haywire, but cardiac arrest, it just stops. So the nurse says, only 1 in 100 people who have cardiac arrests off premises actually make it. I'm like, well, that's cheerful. But then I wanted to be an overachiever, so I had 2 more cardiac arrests at the hospital. And they actually, the defibrillator spit out printouts. So I actually kept one of them. There it is. There's a flat line in the middle there. You can't see it. I was thinking of getting this framed. My wife thinks that's horribly morbid. I think it's kind of cool. So, interesting thing, next day, there's a reasonable amount of pain, but it turns out when CPR is done properly, and it was done on me 3 times, the chest compressions break your ribs. So I had 13 broken ribs. That wasn't a lot of fun. And then they told me that the following day I was going to get a triple bypass. And when they do that, they open up your sternum and go like that. And so that added to my skeletal woes. Day 4 didn't exist. I woke up on day 5, and that happened to be my birthday. So it was both a very good and very bad birthday. I looked up at the board and realized I'd missed an entire day. There was, the whiteboard has the date on it in my room. No one was in my room, and I had this vague memory of fighting off doctors about something. I was being intubated or something. I don't know. I woke up briefly and was fighting them off, and so I had this horrible notion for a period that maybe something had gone terribly wrong. Turns out it hadn't. Everything was fine. Recovery is not fun from this. I did get to go on a pharmaceutical journey. All the greatest hits, ketamine, oxy, even fentanyl. I do not see the appeal of these drugs. I don't know why people like to take them when they don't have to. But I got all the greatest hits. And when you spend some time in the ICU, if you never have, you're going to climb a long ladder of indignities. Really icky stuff, and I'm going to spare you all the details of that while you're eating lunch. The nurses, though, were fantastic, and I eventually got out after about 11 days, and this was all early May. By late June, I was back to playing pickleball, tennis, golf, everything else. I have a really cool scar right here now. The chicks like it. So, questions that I know you're going to ask. The big one, did I see anything while I was out? I had 3 shots at it. I did not, which is, Bill thinks I should make something up, which is very tempting. I am a novelist. I'm good at making stuff up. I feel a little ripped off because I was somewhat versed in near-death experiences. I read a couple books on them about 10 years ago. There was a really good book by a Boston neurosurgeon who had a very vivid experience and kind of wrote about all scientifically why all the usual explanations for near-death experiences can't be true, that there must be something more. So I don't dismiss them. It's a very interesting phenomenon. I just didn't personally experience it. I don't know what that means. It's probably a good sign. What did I learn? Am I a changed person because of this? Learned a few things. The cardiac industry is really good at fixing things and not as good at figuring out ahead of time that they're going to happen. And this is just the limits of current science. Apologies to Dr. Ken. They were fantastic at fixing what was wrong with me, but I had no indication this was going to happen. I felt absolutely fine until the moment I felt lightheaded, and then I had 2 seconds warning before I was out. I learned I had a lot of great friends. I heard from people I hadn't heard from in decades. One of my college buddies from Texas materialized in my hospital room one day. It was really very heartening and wonderful. The importance of CPR. So if you haven't taken a CPR class, please do. I've been able to sort of use this little platform to get a lot of people to do it. And even if you don't do it, sort of be aware that defibrillators are all around you. I asked, there's one just outside the kitchen here. There's a little desk right outside the kitchen entrance, and there's a defibrillator in there. Even if you haven't been trained, they're incredibly easy to use because they talk to you. You unpack them and it starts talking to you and tells you exactly what to do. And it's brain dead easy, really is. So consider taking a CPR class. And the last thing is, it's going to sound a little strange, but dying is completely painless. I found this interesting. And I'd always kind of wondered. Now, I don't mean the things that lead up to dying. There are lots of awful, painful things that can lead up to dying. But the actual act of dying itself, and I remember 2 out of the 3 times it happened to me, is a completely painless experience. You just sort of pass out. So that was kind of reassuring to me. By the way, one of the doctors, I became a subject of curiosity at the UVA Medical Center where I was, because I sort of bucked all these odds. It was 1 in 100 for the first heart attack, but then the 2 more cardiac arrests, and the odds went into the thousands apparently. So all these different doctors would come by my room. It's like, oh, there you are. And one of them said, you died 3 times yesterday. He's now the recipient of the Middle Virginia Bedside Manner Award. But it was sort of fun being the object of curiosity. Am I changed because of this? No, not really. There are people who expect me to start spouting an aphorism a day about seizing life or whatever. I like to think I was doing all that before, so I'm good with it. So my wife's very disappointed in that answer. She thinks I should have a more spiritual answer to it, but I honestly don't. It has been suggested by more than one person that maybe I was saved for a reason. I'm not sure I buy that, but if there was a reason, it was because, and this is a shameless segue, I was only halfway done with a novel I was trying to finish. So I renewed my efforts to finish that novel, and it's a bit of a wrenching process sometimes trying to get a novel written. And I want to tell you a little bit about it, with your permission, and maybe read you a chapter, and then you can throw eggs or whatever. So how did this come about, the second novel? The first novel came about because I had ridiculous experiences on college campuses. In particular, there was a time where at a college reunion, I was holding a door open for an undergraduate, and she refused to walk through the door and accused me of patriarchy. Someone's got to write a novel about this. More recently, I blog quite a bit. I used to blog a lot more, and I blog a lot about school systems and universities, and in particular some of the private schools in New York that were being fully captured by ideology and a very extreme left woke ideology, critical race theory you've probably heard of. And I was blogging a lot about this. And each time I wrote about a specific school, and what would happen is people started feeding me information from inside each school, like, oh, you got to write about our school. It's going nuts. I'm too scared to say anything, but you could say something. And I was happy to be the punching bag. But I'd always list the names of the board members at the end of each post of that particular school, because those are the people that were really infuriating me. These were the people in a position to stop what was going on. The blatant racism, for instance, of critical race theory. They were in the position to stop it, and they were doing nothing. Sitting on their hands, allowing the basic principles of Western civilization and the Enlightenment to be overthrown on their watch. That's not an exaggeration. And all because, they wanted Tiffany to get into Harvard, and if they raised their hand and objected, maybe Tiffany wouldn't get a good recommendation. That's literally what's causing all this. So that combined with, and by the way, the whole board thing has been brought into sharp relief by what's happened at Harvard in particular over the last few months. I mean, their governance has been a complete disaster. Deference to any Harvard grads, including my brother in the room. Also, I've been struck by the remarkable emergence of the trans rights movement, which has seemingly come out of nowhere. And it's now the third rail on college campuses. If you suggest that it's wrong for a 14-year-old to have permanent life-altering surgery without even getting permission of the parents, that makes you a bad person. That brings crowds out on campus. That I've seen it at UVA. I walked through 200 angry students protesting a lecture being given by a woman who wrote a book about how a generation of young girls is being lost to this ideology, and they're showing up to clinics in groups of 6 or 7 all at once from the same class, all wanting to transition. These are 15, 16-year-olds. A buddy of mine's daughter, who's 10, announced that she wanted to be called Mark now. It's like, because she's a boy. My friend said, what makes you say you're a boy? Well, because I like to climb trees, and in biology class I like to play with worms, and my friends all say those are boy things, so I must be a boy. She's perhaps a tomboy, but if you're a tomboy now, you're immediately targeted by teachers and psychologists and others, and they immediately put you in a box saying, well, obviously you should be transitioning. Anyway, so these two things were brought together in the new book. To understand the chapter I'm about to read, all you need to know is, the background you need to know is that a trans girl, that's a boy who has transitioned to girl, has run away from her all-girls private school on the Upper East Side. One of the parents at that school is being blamed by the trans community for her disappearance. They discover that he's hosting a golf outing for his firm, Bedrock Capital. Feel free to read into that. At his club in East Hampton, and they decide, with the guidance of their activist lawyer, Sylvia Halfred, feel free to read into that, they decide to stage a protest. And the only other thing you need to know is the definition of the word cis. How many people know what cis or cisgender means? I'm just curious. A handful. So cisgender is a word that was invented a handful of years ago. It means that you conform to the gender that you were born with. So I am cisgender. I'm male, and I was born male. So most people are cisgender. The reason that needs to exist as a word in woke ideology is because if you didn't have that word, you might be tempted to use the word normal. And very bad, very bad. Okay, so with your permission, I'm going to read this chapter. Hopefully you find it funny. And then we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Drag Queen Story Hours had, by all accounts, modest roots. It started in San Francisco. A local activist who self-identified as queer took her young son to a children's library event. She found it welcoming, but in her words, heteronormative. She imagined an event that might be more inclusive and affirming to local LGBTQ families. Instead of nice middle-aged ladies reading books, why not drag queens? This is a real thing, by the way. It was there at the Harvey Milk Memorial Library that drag queen story hours were born. The idea spread quickly with chapters opening in 35 cities. It would have been easy enough for Sylvia Halfred to rally some of her usual activists, but today she wanted something more, something splashier. It made for better copy. And so Sylvia tapped into the city drag community. Normally, this would have been a straightforward matter, a mere phone call or two. Sylvia was well connected, but this was more involved. Drag queens often needed time to prepare their elaborate outfits. There was quite a bit of scrambling about and a fair bit of complaining. One or two grumbled that the trans community was sucking all the air out of the room. Drag queens, they argued, were not trans. They were just regular gay men who liked to dress in women's clothes. The T in LGBT was getting all the attention these days, and it rankled. But Sylvia had pulled it off in less than 24 hours. The holdouts were persuaded by the opportunity to take their street theater to a new audience, particularly this audience. It was too delicious to pass up. There would be no children's stories this time. The convoy drove past the members-only sign out front and pulled up on the circle of the club's main entrance. 64 drag queens poured out of the two buses. There was Tiffany Diamond, dressed like Madonna in her Material Girl days, and Trinity Chu, who channeled Eliza Minnelli cabaret look complete with cane and bowler. Velvet Angel had feathery wings so large she had to use 2 seats, and still they came. Adore Milano wore an antebellum dress of pink. Sister Jade sported a live boa constrictor around his neck. China Del Rio, going for a minimalist look, wore a Go Lame thong and sports bra. Rosie Wild, who was fully Zaftig, came in full sadomasochistic regalia, all leather and spikes with a strapped ball in his mouth. The others had complained this was not an SMN space, but Rosie, removing his ball, accused them of not being inclusive, so the others quickly relented, taking solace in the fact that Rosie kept his ball in his mouth the whole ride out. The bus drivers, who hadn't managed to lose their bewildered looks all morning, opened the cargo hatches where the drags retrieved dozens of signs. As much as she wanted to stretch her legs, Sylvia remained in the bus. She had friends at Dune Haven and quite enjoyed being invited there. She only came to make sure things went smoothly, which is to say, not smoothly at all. The Dune Haven Club posted a single staffer in its reception area. Velvet Angel laughed when he asked of whom the party was a guest. "We're America's guest, sweetie." The small army of queens streamed past the poor man, ignoring his objections, and walked through the quiet clubhouse. Sylvia told them that they would find everyone out back having lunch, so that's where they went. Out the other side, they descended almost cabaret-like down 2 sets of stairs to the pavilion. As Emily Post was silent on the matter of mass drag queen intrusions, most of the members were rendered mute. Was this some odd club event they missed on the calendar? Emmett Hendley knew otherwise. The club president, he rose to confront the first descending queen, Velvet Angel. The group didn't have a leader, but if they did, it would have been Velvet. She had the best outfit. "Excuse me, but what is this?" Emmett demanded. Putting his hands on either side of Emmett's face, he kissed him squarely on the lips. "It's a protest, darling. Now be a good boy and go back to your cheeseburger. Love the Madras shorts, by the way." Too shocked to respond, Emmett scurried off to call the local gendarme. Cell phones were strictly forbidden, even the event of unscheduled drag queen outbursts, so he ran inside his cabana where he wouldn't be seen. Tiffany Diamond handed Velvet a bullhorn. "Well, hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Aren't you all just so beautiful? I know we're going to be the best of friends. And oh, by the way, this is a protest. We're here to stop trans genocide." "Stop what?" asked one member to another. "Some kind of genocide," I think he said. Velvet turned to her fellow queens. "Wave your signs, girls." They did. The signs printed up for the occasion by Sylvia's staff said things like, "Bedrock harbors transphobes," and "Bedrock values equal fascism." That's right. Bedrock Capital supports transphobia. The hist is one. Hiss. Now sit back and enjoy the show. They marched through the aisles carrying their signs. "Boo hiss. Bedrock is cis," they chanted. "What does that even mean?" asked one member to another. "I have no idea," said the other. "Is it some sort of pejorative?" Again, no idea, but I doubt it's a compliment. They marched through to the beachside. Angel, still holding the bullhorn, said, "We find you guilty of hosting a transphobic company and supporting genocide." "Shame," the others chanted. They laid down their signs and dispersed through the crowd. It was time for free-form expression. Trinity Chu, a former gymnast at NYU, discovered that the pavilion's support poles could be repurposed as stripper poles. This made Velvet envious, as his elaborate costume limited his range of movement. Others danced about, some focusing their drag queen arts on specific tables. Millicent Eastwick, a third-generation member and well into her 70s, had been enjoying a light salad niçoise with friends when China Del Rio decided they needed to be entertained. He thrust the hairy business side of his thong into the group and began to twerk. "It would be one thing if you could pull off a thong, dear, but honestly," said Millicent. China sniffed with indignation. He reached over and grabbed a handful of lobster salad and smeared it over his bare chest, then writhing with the kind of ecstasy some can only get while smearing other people's food on their bodies. The pavilion then descended into something resembling the late Roman Empire with writhing bodies and orgiastic groans. This was a bit more performative than drag queen story hours, but they'd been encouraged to be fully expressive. Sylvia was getting her money's worth. Minutes later, 2 officers from the East Hampton Village Police arrived. Used to dealing with DUIs and unruly share houses, a spontaneous outburst of drag queens was a new one for them. "They are trespassing," cried Emmett. "Arrest them." Sergeant Gallo tried to suppress a smile. He was not, nor would he ever be, a member of the Dunehaven Club. And while he had no animosity towards it or its members, the summer community did get on his nerves sometimes. Things were so much calmer in the winter months. A week or two and all these people would be gone. "Sir, I'm guessing you've never visited our town jail." "Of course not." "Well, I'm guessing we could fit maybe 4 of your friends here, depending on whether they were wearing wings." "But they are trespassing." "So you're confirming that none of these people is your guest?" "I assume that was rhetorical, Sergeant." It was true that the sergeant was being a wise ass. He was rather enjoying this. "All right, do they have a leader?" "That one, I suppose." Emmett pointed at Angel, who was just then pretending to fly around the pavilion. "You with the wings, over here." Angel flitted over to the sergeant. "And what's your name?" "Velvet, sweetie, Velvet Angel." "Do you have some sort of identification?" She pointed to a tattoo on her arm. Sure enough, it said Velvet Angel. "I was thinking more along the lines of a driver's license." "I don't drive." Officer Gallo sighed. "Okay, why, may I ask, are you disturbing lunch for these fine people?" Listening to the convoluted explanation, something about Bedrock Capital and that missing girl in the city, Officer Gallo knew right away this was above his pay grade, which was to say he wanted no ownership of whatever came of this. He called his captain, who, recognizing the same thing, immediately called the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, who in turn called the DA, who was reached on the 8th hole of Bethpage Black. This all happened in less time than it took Millicent Eastwick to finish her salad niçoise. "Oh my God," said Sullivan to the commissioner, "we don't want to be within 100 miles of this. Tell the officer to ask them to leave and then get the hell out of there." The command was rapidly sent back down the chain, and Officer Galler was only too happy to comply. Sorry, that was a bit long, but that's the gist of it. Thank you for tolerating the extra long chapter there, but that was a fun chapter to write, I have to admit. And if there's any resemblance to actual clubs, I disavow the notion. So with that, if anyone wants to chat or ask questions, right away, yes.
I'm sitting here and listening, and it's incredible what you've done. Is it in your a figment of imagination, or did you do a lot of research? Sorry.
That's a loaded question. Well, once I started getting all the trans stuff and drag queens, I thought, where could I put the drag queens that would be fun for me? So it was certainly not going to be any club I was a member of. But I have a little... there's more fun in this for me than you realize. The name of the club president closely resembles the name of a very good friend of mine who might have been club president of a club that suspiciously resembles the club in the chapter. So it's fun to load little Easter eggs like that in what you do. So I don't know how to answer your question. One thing leads to another, and if you're not having fun while you're writing it, people aren't going to have fun reading it. Oh, it's called All the Lovely People. And it won't be out for about a year. It's only just been sent into the publishers, so I would love to tell you all to go buy a copy. But you can buy this on Amazon, so if you haven't read it, this is fun.
Can you tell us about that one and when it's going to be on TV and what they're doing on TV with it?
Sure. So Campus Land is about 1 year of insanity at an Ivy League-like college in Havenport, Connecticut. Again, you can draw your own conclusions. It's sort of a raucous satire. It came about, I think I told you, because I was accused of patriarchy for holding a door open. I also went to a free speech conference at Yale one day, and 200 students showed up and tried to shut down a free speech conference, having skipped irony class that day. So that's what led me to write Campus Land. Sort of shocked how well it did. And it got picked up by a company called Relativity Media that wants to turn it into a TV series. And they've hired a showrunner, the guy who did The Walking Dead, and they've hired an independent producer. And so they've got a whole team. I don't want to imply it's 100% done because it's Hollywood. These things are never done till they're done. But sorry, it's being pitched to the streaming services this month, actually. So hopefully one of them says yes. Another. Well, I told you where I got the idea for Campus Land. When I was walking out of that conference through 200 yelling, spitting students, I thought someone should write a novel with all this. Where's Tom Wolfe? But Tom Wolfe was dead, sadly. So I thought if no one else is going to do it, I'll figure out how to write a novel. The new one came about. I can't be too specific about it because it would be a little impolitic, but it really was my frustration with those boards, and there was a specific person involved that everyone was saying was so lovely, and yet she was doing a complete disservice to the board and the community and the school she was running, and it frustrated the hell out of me. And I think what's happened with the Harvard board has really highlighted the governance has fallen apart at these schools. And it's not just schools. There's been ideological capture of virtually all of our institutions. And I point my finger at the boards. So that I wanted to write something about that, and I wanted to incorporate the insanity of the trans rights movement. And mind you, if you're over 18, do whatever you want. But the idea that 15-year-olds can transition without their parents' permission, when in the same state you probably can't get a tattoo without your parents' permission, is insane to me. Yes, use Joe.
Usually at the state level, so how do you impact it? The private school level, K-12, it's all with the NAIS, National Association of Independent Schools. So now that you've looked into and written on this subject, how should the public go about moderating it?
So you're right about the NAIS, National Association of Independent Schools. They do the certification for all the private schools. They are 100% complicit in this, and they're actually cheerleaders enforcing a lot of this on schools. Like, if you want to be certified, you better be on board with our woke agenda. So they're 100% behind critical race theory, which is the most racist thing. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but so you're absolutely right about that. And public schools, I encourage people to run for school boards. That's the front lines of the culture wars right now, is school boards. And most school boards have been captured by an ideological minority, and it's a problem. And people say, well, maybe I don't have kids in the school. You can still run for the school board. If you really want to get into it, run for school board. But if you're not willing to spend that much time, and if that's a giant commitment, stop giving money to all these schools. There are very few schools I can think of that are worth giving money to. And in the case of the Ivy League, every dollar that they get is marginal disutility. What I mean by that is Yale is worse off with each new dollar it gets. Why is that? Because all that money, Yale has $42 billion, Harvard has $50 billion. All that money enables them to completely ignore what their alums think. It also enables them to hire armies of administrators. And when Campus Land came out, for the first time, the number of administrators at Yale exceeded the number of professors. This fall, the number of administrators at Yale exceeded the number of undergraduates, which is 6,000. There are armies of DEI. I probably don't have to explain what DEI is anymore after this fall. There are armies of DEI people. There are armies of Title IX administrators. And these are just angry bureaucrats that are ruining these schools, honestly. So I could go on and on, but stop revering these schools, too, because they're not. I had a great experience at Yale. I loved Yale. And I still love the Yale I went to, but it is not that school now. It is nothing close to that school. Ironically, it's much more beautiful. There's so much money. The buildings are all perfect, and the grass is, I mean, the most beautiful place you can see. But it's rotten to the core. Anyone else?
So I got a kick out of you talking about San Francisco because I'm a native, and that's why I'm living here. But aside from that, everything that happened on October 7th was, horrific, obviously, in Israel. But what's been the awakening has been the obvious thing of what was going on with all the prejudice. And it sort of, to me, seemed like it was the turning point, particularly with Ackerman and all these guys, the hedge funds guys, finally coming out and saying, we want the names of these people that are behaving this way. And, we want to make it public. So coming as a peak experience, because now you're writing, I wish the book was coming out right now.
Me
time
too.
would have been perfect. But now trying to pull back and get people sane again is really the question that I have. And, as an individual that's, a drop in the lake of water here, besides being involved with the education system, on a political level, we have a politician here, how can we as individuals take back the rights that we have lost, our freedom, to express ourselves and have a common discussion about differences of opinion and values and all these things that we all grew up with, because it's been hijacked. And I guess I'm looking for you for solutions, because you've written this fabulous, funny book, which humor is the best way to deal with a lot of this stuff, and I just get frustrated.
Well, I wrote Campus Land because I thought maybe a humorous novel to make my point was more effective than 100 or 1,000 letters to editors. And because culture, there's a saying, politics is downstream from culture. And what the woke left has long realized, and this dates back to someone named Antonio Gramsci, who ran the Communist Party in Italy in the 1920s, who came up with the whole idea, the long march through the institutions, that you create the truth, and this ties into critical theory, which you've probably heard about, and those that have the power create the truth. There's no such thing as objective truth. So they've effectively seized control of most of America's institutions, the ones in particular with the most cultural leverage, like schools and Hollywood and the NGOs, big foundations. And they've done it very effectively. The long march through the institutions is basically over. And I, as recently as September, I was extremely bearish. I mean, the cultural rot at places like Harvard and Yale is so ingrained. It's a cancer so deep that no amount of chemo can solve it. But there's a little bit of hope now. Sometimes pendulums are wrecking balls, but maybe this pendulum is swing back. Bill Ackman. It's unfortunate that it took dead Israeli babies to wake some people up. But where's Bill Ackman been? I welcome him nonetheless. He's been a very powerful advocate. But getting Claudine Gay demoted is great. She's horrendous, but that's such a small thing compared to what has to happen. You could read about Carol Hooven, my friend who was an evolutionary biologist at Harvard, who got chased out of Harvard for basically saying there are two sexes. For stating something that everyone in this room takes as patently obvious. That got her chased out by the DEI people at Harvard. By the way, there's a quote, and I forget, maybe someone will remember who said this. The quote is, we go mad in quickly and in crowds, and we recover our sanity slowly and individually. And so maybe we're in the slow part where as individuals we're recovering our sanity, but we definitely went mad culturally as a crowd. Yes?
I think that there is a degree of optimism. You have not addressed faculties. And I think that the faculties at all of these educational institutions, no matter on what level you're talking about, are trying very hard to deal with a lot of these issues with the administrators. And that's very hard to do because of obvious reasons. You don't want to, make your tenure vulnerable, for example. But they are, I mean, my daughter is a professor at a very important institution, and I think they are making inroads, actually. And maybe the whole brouhaha with Harvard and the other universities recently will make all of these administrations a little more sensitive to the faculty issues. And faculties are working really hard to educate students, and students are really working hard to get educated. So, you know, you have to really try to recognize that aspect of it. One other thing I wanted to mention is there is the private sector that can do really terrific things. And I don't know if anybody's aware of it, but today it was announced that Michael Bloomberg is giving hundreds of millions of dollars to the public school systems in several important cities in order to have them have programs that encourage students and support students in the high school level to work in medical fields. So you talked about medicine here today, and these students will get internships with these funds and everything else on the high school level. College, they'll get high school credit, and they're learning to work in all different aspects of the medical field.
Did you have a
so
question?
that when they don't even have to go to college. And I think it's the most fabulous initiative.
So I'm going to politely disagree with you about professors. Professors, apparently your daughter aside, are very much a part of the problem. There are a few brave ones who are starting, there are a few at Harvard who are standing up and showing us a different way. But to get a job as a professor in most universities, you have to write a DEI statement, basically bending the knee to the DEI industry, which they make you complicit right away. And every department has DEI, at Harvard, for instance, every department has a DEI commissar. So there's a DEI, so infrastructure, and it feeds down into every department, and they monitor everything you write. It's what got Carol Hooven into trouble. Her DEI, it was a grad student who was the DEI commissar for her department that basically got Carol Hooven chased out of Harvard. And Carol's brilliant. So I wish I could say that the professors were part of the solution, but
They're trying to work with the administrations on many issues and get their administrations. I think they're much more proactive with some faculty, not just on what we're talking about, but all the issues and getting rid of all of this overload in administration.
well, I hope you're right. How's that? My Yale friend.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
What you're doing is great, and I hope you're able to do it with more than just satire. I wish you could run for public office because no, what you bring up is real. What Ellen talked, they're all delusionary. 95% of the faculty at Harvard is Democratic. 3% is Republican.
I think that's a little high.
You cannot get a job at Harvard as a professor if you're a Republican. Yale's not much better. The whole thing is captured. If anyone ever got up now and said, listen, I think our country has done a terrific job in helping the black population. Today, if two people are equal, the black fellow or woman will get the job. We've done everything to be as we're probably the least racist country in the world today, but you wouldn't know it when you read the thing. Same with all the the kids and sex changes. The whole thing is ridiculous, and I think what you've brought up is fabulous. And I just hope you're able to express it, reach a lot of people, and make a difference.
Well, thank you. You've never met anyone less suited for public office than me. I appreciate the sentiment. And I do object to this whole concept of systemic racism that you brought up. It comes from out of the critical theory, and the idea is that it basically is DWEs, dead white Europeans, who had the power through most of U.S. history. And as such, they were the ones who could create truth. Remember, truth is not a real thing. It just comes from those who have power. They create the truth. So if you buy that, you have a reason to dismiss everything about our history as being racist, because the dead white Europeans all created their truth. And now different people have to take over the institutions so they can create the truth. It's garbage. I mean, there's only one truth, right? But this is not an accepted thing at universities anymore. Neil.
Do you get any pushback from publishers or other ways that you're getting your message out, knowing that it is a cynical view of what's going on, and let's not doing it in that left, coming in from the left side?
So good question. So since Campusland came out, there's a new phenomenon in the publishing industry. It's called a sensitivity reader or sensitivity editor. That is exactly what you think it is. It's someone that they all have it. It's someone who reads your novel and picks out all the things that are going to trigger people, all the insensitive comments or remarks. Everything I just read to you would send a sensitivity editor over the edge of a cliff. It's a big problem. The big publishing houses, and I'm with one of them, they're the worst where this is concerned. They're being taken over by armies of younger people. There was a book a couple years ago called American Dirt. Did anyone read it here? Okay. Big bestseller. It was about the plight of a Mexican single mother trying to bring her daughter, I think, over the border for a better life in the United States. So you would think that would be a nice theme, you'd think a sensitivity reader would like that. But it was written by a white American woman, and it wasn't her tale to tell. It was appropriation. And at my publishing house, which is owned by Macmillan, they were split 100% on generational lines. Everyone under the age of 30 or 35 thought they should ditch the book and not publish it at all. And everyone over the age of 35 was like, well, without cultural appropriation, we wouldn't have the Rolling Stones. So it's a big deal, and they're gaining ground because they're the younger ones. And as people retire, my editor is my age, and she's on my side, and she fights for me. So, but it's a big problem.
So I wonder if anybody else has experienced this and what we can do in our lives in this regard. That's my question. What are our lives? I checked in at the doctor this morning, and at the doctor, when I was checking in, they asked, "Are you your gender assigned at birth?"
Yeah, there's no such thing.
I was shocked. So I said yes, and then they say, "What is your gender?" Female. But I feel helpless because I was so upset that they would ask me something like that. I'm not judgmental, but I felt insulted. So can we do anything about that when they start asking those kind of questions?
Never give your pronouns, because the second you do, you've been made complicit in their lie. There are two genders. You can have surgery to change your parts. You can put dresses on as a man and have surgeries, and it's not going to change the fact that you were born a man. And I have no problem if you want to have operations and wear dresses, but we probably won't have beers. But you're still a man, and there's no changing that. But this fundamental fact got Carol Hooven chased out of Harvard, and it is the craziness. I don't know if everyone keeps up with this, but the craziness of the trans movement right now is wildly out of control, and it's really affecting teenage girls the most. Teenage girls, more than boys, are very susceptible to social suggestion and social pressure, and it's become a very trendy thing now to be trans. And by the way, there are over 100 genders now and counting. Yeah, I could read you a list. It's some crazy stuff. Oh no, genders. I'm talking about like demi-boy, two-spirit, trans female, trans. I've got a whole demi boy is one of my favorite. It means you're sort of a boy. What is taught in schools now is that gender is an immense spectrum, and you can move even on a daily basis around from one point on the spectrum to the next. You're never just male or female.
So what would about them? What would have been the correct answer? Woman?
I'm a woman. I'm a woman, stupid.
In your research, have you figured out what the end point of the Gramsci March through our cultural institutions is?
So there never is an end point, and this is an important point. In progressive revolutions everywhere, the revolution is the point. It never ends, and the second you compromise, you will notice that the very moment you do it, the goalpost just got moved 10 yards further. So, Cuba is a great example. The revolution, in theory, was fought and won there in 1958. I think it was 58. But they are self-declared to be in a permanent revolutionary state, and there's always a new enemy. And if you read 1984, there's always a new enemy out there, right? And it changes. So the revolution very much is the point. It's what makes them comfortable. They're not happy if they're not marching in the streets about something. So you will never have a situation where they say, oh, well, the Supreme Court decided gay marriage is legal, so we win, so we're going to go home and live quiet lives. No, the second that happened, the trans rights movement suddenly sprung into being. And if that movement is ever thoroughly successful, you will see something else take its place. It might be polyamory, it might be bestiality, I mean, who knows? That sounds crazy, but believe me, it's not.
Doesn't this unfortunately boil down to Republican versus Democrat today? The progressives, you may not like it, but the progressives are behind all this. And the Democratic, I've been a Democrat, and now I've switched to Republican. And I don't like Trump. That's a horrendous part of it. But the Democrats, this is all brought along by progressive Democrats. That's the whole thing.
Well, so there are lots of liberals who are not on board with this. So Barry Weiss, who's a friend of mine, and if you don't subscribe to her free press, I highly recommend it. It's $5 a month. It's called the Free Press. She's the best journalist in America today. She famously quit the New York Times. I mean, she's married to a woman and she's liberal, but the New York Times became a woke echo chamber that she couldn't stand anymore. So she famously quit and wrote a resignation letter that was widely circulated. So a lot of liberals, traditional liberals, are profoundly unhappy with this. But it is a fact to say that the woke progressive left that Barry Weiss doesn't like has, for now, taken control of the Democrat Party. And it's not all Democrats, but they're the ones driving the bus. That's why you see rainbow-colored flags flying over our embassies all around the world. That's not the mainstream of the party.
Well, the only way you can beat it is by reversing that at the moment.
How do you do that?
Well, you listen to clever lectures, mostly. Well, back there.
Unfortunately.
The woke phenomena that you've outlined is how is it being received abroad? Say in Europe, the Middle East, well, not the Middle East, but in Asia.
Well, you see, Elon Musk calls it the woke mind virus. It's thoroughly has thoroughly infected Great Britain and Canada, Scotland. Yes. Well, Canada's worse, actually. Canada has lost their minds. Scotland has too. England, yeah. So Asia, not so much. Latin America, they have no patience for this, for the most part. So it's mostly the English-speaking countries where it's happened. Muslim countries, well, they're laughing. Anybody? One more way back there.
How would you describe trans sports and the desire of men to compete against women? I saw one in boxing recently. All sorts of areas. Makes no sense.
So Leah Thomas, who is the most famous transgender athlete, 6'4", swims for Penn. I think she may have just graduated. Not even committed enough to cut off his parts, but he's hanging out in the girls' locker room. And boxing, someone's going to be killed, honestly. And there have been some injuries. There was a serious volleyball injury where a male player spiked it in a female's face, and it's insane. And this is now, if you suggest that you think it's insane, you're a transphobe, and you're publicly shamed as such. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, she's very liberal, but she's come out very much. She said, I'm a traditional feminist. I'm here to protect women's rights and girls' rights. And protecting that means Leah Thomas isn't swimming against my daughter. That has made her, you would not believe the vilification that has happened of J.K. Rowling. There are Harry Potter conventions where you get thrown out of the convention if you're heard to mention her name. Not kidding. She's called a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist, I think that stands for. And you do not want to be labeled a TERF with this crowd, because they're angry and violent. But honestly, it's these people that I'm giving you a little political, have captured the Democrat Party right now, because that's you see this in the mainstream of the party, and it does not reflect the values of most Democrats, but it's the people who have control.
Can I just ask one other question regarding that? And that is, women have fought for so many years to gain certain rights that they never had. And I don't see women's groups speaking up as much as they should against this trans situation.
Well, this has split the feminist movement in two. The J.K. Rowling's on one side, and a bunch of feminists on the other side who still feel the impulse to be on the side of whatever the progressive position is deemed to be. So it has split. It has rendered them asunder. Leah Thomas.
Leah Thomas. Okay. This could be ended with one action in one day. If the women said, "The lane is yours, have at it," it would be done nationwide. Why do you think that hasn't happened?
Well, the women swimmers for Penn were all threatened by the Penn administration.
Yeah.
With disciplinary action if they even objected to Leah Thomas using their locker room, which he did.
So, which indicates that the women have no balls, basically, in this world. They're not taking care of business.
They should have acted as a group. You're right.
Yeah.
That would have been the proper thing to do. Yeah. And Leah Thomas should have swum in an empty pool.
That's right. That's what should happen. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody.